Probably around the time this video is going up or within the next day or so, we'll see a number of videos to the effect of, is this game worth $60? Or maybe more directly, this game isn't worth $60. And this wouldn't be the first time for this question. We saw it before with Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze, New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, and a whole bunch more. But this question's always felt weird to me because it's not really answering the question that it should be. And I'll try to answer this a little bit for Pokemon Mystery Dungeon by the end of the video, but I think by that point, you'll understand why that's not really what this is all about. And I'll go ahead and spoil the ending now in hopes that you'll keep watching to understand the reasoning, and that is that there is no universal intrinsic monetary value to any game, or anything to that matter. So the baseline question ultimately should be, to you, is this game worth your $60? And there's a lot to unpack there, so let's talk about it. As I alluded to, in the past we've seen trends of YouTubers making videos titled, "Is Donkey Kong Tropical Freeze worth $60?" or the same for New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, Link's Awakening, Kirby Star Allies, and so on. And ever since the last round or two of these, I've wanted to take the time to expound on this conversation and see if that's really the way we should be approaching this question. And when I say the question, I mean the obvious. You as a consumer might want to know, I'm interested in Pokemon Mystery Dungeon. If I spend the $60 asking price, will I regret it, or will I be happy with my decision? And this is actually a really good question. I'd hope that unless you have so much disposable income that you couldn't possibly regret a $60 purchase, this is something you would be asking yourself. But unfortunately, I think the videos trying to typically answer this question are answering two different topics at once without any delineation. Firstly, should the publisher charge this much money for this game? And second, should you buy it at that asking price? And ultimately, answering both of these questions as if they were just one does a pretty great disservice to us as consumers. Okay, if this doesn't make sense yet, I promise it will. So we'll mostly break this video down into those two parts. First of all being, what should a company charge for a game? And as I said in my intro, this doesn't even have to be tied to games specifically. Diamonds are infamously priced way higher than they actually cost. Their value, if we want to call it that, as in the amount of money put into getting them to a point of sale, is significantly lower than their retail cost. But you know what? Even when they're overpriced, people just buy diamonds. So getting back to games, that's not to say all games are overpriced, but rather that there isn't such a thing as intrinsic value on the marketplace. Like Horizon Zero Dawn for the PS4 goes on sale for $5 sometimes, but we can all agree that if there were an intrinsic value, it would be worth more than $5 a copy. So let's hit a little closer to home with Nintendo. We're still talking about what companies should charge for a game. Essentially, there's two different routes they could go down. On one hand, they could try their best to charge for a game equal to what they think it's worth or proportional to what it costs them. This was actually a little bit the case back in the 90s when we would see most home console games released at $50, which is around $90 adjusted for inflation, but we'll ignore that for now. But every once in a while, a game like Earthbound, Chrono Trigger, or Phantasy Star 4 would launch anywhere from $70 and to even $100. This is usually because they cost more resources, so it would be akin to The Witcher 3 coming to Switch for $80 because they had to use the 32GB cartridge, which costs much more money. But if the goal is to get companies to charge less for games that we think are worth less or cost them less money to make, this would be one way to do it. A port of a Wii U title, for example, would be worth, $40, whereas a new Switch game would be worth $60. But that would mean that it would inevitably lean the other way as well. Breath of the Wild took over 5 years to develop and has hundreds of hours worth of content. Super Smash Bros. Has dozens of third-party franchises that are licensed out to it. And I'm afraid to say there's a whole lot more examples too. If there's a sliding scale, it's not just going to slide down, it would also have to slide up. And personally, I'm very happy that I can spend $60 on Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and not spend another $60 on another game that I don't think is very worth it to me. And this is company's second option. Set a standard price that everything adheres to. This was the controversy around Tropical Freeze. The standard for all games when it was released on Wii U was $50 and then became a $20 Nintendo Selects title. Then when it came to Switch, it was $60. I don't think that anyone would argue that inherently Tropical Freeze wasn't worth the same price that other $60 games were, but rather felt slighted, as though Nintendo was overcharging now, when really, they were just sticking to the new industry standard, for better or for worse. As a standard practice, it's hard to say what's right or wrong, but having a standard pricing that intermittently strays from the norm, like for Captain Toad or Sushi Striker, is at least a simple way of approaching pricing. I also think there may be a side benefit where Nintendo is sort of able to fund bigger ventures with the profits of smaller ones. Like Fire Emblem Three Houses probably cost a lot more money to make than Super Mario Party, but Three Houses sold about a quarter the number of copies. So maybe that is offset internally by each other's sales, meaning both series can continue rather than canceling Fire Emblem because it's not quite as profitable or something like that. That's just a theory, but it makes sense to me. And yes, I know Intelligent System develops Fire Emblem, but you get the picture. And the last bit here is microtransactions. Luckily, we haven't had to broach this for Nintendo in the home console space really. There is definitely DLC or some even limited cosmetics, but not endless microtransactions as of yet. But this is the other way the companies go about recouping costs, and if our options are standard game pricing, a sliding scale both ways, or microtransactions, I know what I'm choosing. So as I said, the first half is what should a company charge for a game? And with indies or AAAs alike, the answer is pretty simple. They're going to charge what people will pay, or at least what they believe consumers are going to pay. Nintendo holds the belief that their titles are evergreen, so they keep them at pretty much a set price, and they just have them go on sale every once in a while. And frankly, in some ways, that sucks to get into, because if you were to buy a PS4, you could get a whole slew of games for next to nothing. And that's because either those publishers don't believe their games will sell at full price anymore, or they have evidence to show they're not. But the question to be answered here is whether a company is right to charge a certain price for a game. And frankly, they can charge literally whatever they want. But the market's going to have to agree with them eventually. Which brings us to the second half of this topic, which, as a reminder, is what should you pay for a game? And unfortunately, the reason the aforementioned videos are so successful is that it's really easy to answer this question by giving the answer to the first. If Nintendo is justified in charging $60 for a remake of a Game Boy game, then I can feel justified spending that amount of money, right? Well, I don't think it's quite that simple. I mean, it could be. Again, if you have enough spare money that you don't care one way or another, then have at it. But you're watching this video, so chances are that's not the case. I think this is best exemplified in a story about Mario + Rabbids Kingdom Battle. The game was $50 at launch, and I got it as a birthday present from my lovely wife. I was playing it one day, and my friend Nate asked me if I thought it was worth it for him to buy it too. And objectively, the game is absolutely worth $50 in terms of content, quality, development, game design, all that stuff. And on top of that, I was enjoying it, so I said, yeah, absolutely it's worth it. But I didn't take into account his actual taste in games, which is platformers, adventure games, multiplayer games, and anything that feels active and exciting. So I checked in on him a week later, asked him how he was liking it, and he said, not much. He gave it a fair shot, and the same thing ended up happening with Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Again, just not really the right game for him. Definitely worth $60 objectively, but not his game. And I think that those examples show that not every game is for everyone. So if someone was just answering whether those two games are worth their price on an industry level, that's not the same as answering it on an individual level. Just for another anecdote, let's take Kirby Star Allies. This is a game that, after I made a video on DLC a few months ago, there were a lot of comments from people saying how many hours they've put into the game and how much they loved it. And I'm so happy for those people that they've enjoyed it so much. But as for me, I had just enough foresight to not get the game myself, because I knew that for $60, I wouldn't get as much enjoyment out of it as I would feel happy with for that price point. I did not, however, make the same wise decision with Mario Tennis. So, to come back to Pokemon Mystery Dungeon as the pertinent example, but this will also apply to any game, how do you know if it'll be worth it for you to spend the asking price on the proposed game? I think the real trick is to do just a little bit of research. I know that's not super exciting, but if you're being careful about your finances, this is something that's important. With this game specifically, there's a demo that you can try out to get a feel for the gameplay loop, which ultimately is one of the most important parts of deciding whether or not a game is for you. And then finding out an idea of the length or depth of the game is also really important. For some people, the value of a game is the amount of hours they get out of it, but for others, it's more about the experience, regardless of how long it takes them. So if a moving 5-hour game would be more worth it to you than a 100-hour spread out one, that's something to consider. So this is where I've landed in terms of actually answering this question. Unless I know I'm sold from the get-go, with a lot of games I'll read reviews, and not just from outlets that I trust, but from individuals that I know I have common tastes with, and I'll understand their gripes and their accolades and take those into consideration for myself. And then based off of that, I'll set a dollar amount regardless of the price that I think the game is worth for me specifically. If that number lines up with the full asking price, then we got it, we're golden. I'll just buy it at launch, easy enough. If it's a little bit under the asking price, then maybe my wants to be a part of the conversation at the time will make up that difference. But if it's anything under that, then I just wait for a sale. And then sometimes by the time it even gets to that sale point, I'm like, it's all right. I've read enough about it. I know enough about it at this point that I'm really pretty good. And then in that case, I'm thankful that I waited and didn't spend the extra money on it, because goodness knows I've got plenty of games to be playing already. They're backlogged for days right now. So to take Pokemon Mystery Dungeon as the example right now, I've played one of the games in the series before, and I didn't really care much for the gameplay loop. It's a lot more talkative than I like this kind of gameplay to be, and I love a lot of Pokemon, but this isn't the way that I prefer to experience them. My mental price is probably set around $20, and I've got a good feeling that that's never going to be the actual retail price, even on sale. So probably this just isn't a game for me, but that's fine. Maybe I'll see enough stuff after the fact that I will want to get it. That mental price might go up to match the actual price. But only you can prevent forest fires. Only you can decide what a game is worth to you. Frankly, I actually have a lot more to say on this topic, but I don't have time in this video. And also the main thing is quite a big tangent, but I'll give you a preview. I'm curious if there's genres that just aren't worth $60 to the general public anymore. Like a traditional Star Fox game, can that be worth $60 these days? I don't know, hard to say. But for right now, I wanted to address this specific topic, and I hope that it helps you. But that's what I think. What do you think? Do you think games should be priced on a sliding scale, and what makes a game worth more or less to you? Let me know all that and more in the comments section down below, and we'll pull some of those comments out to talk about on our podcast this weekend called Directly to You. It's youtube.com/directly to you. It's also on podcast platforms like, Apple Podcasts and all that kind of stuff, Spotify as well. And then also while you're down there, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to fanatixfour for more content like this every Tuesday and Thursday from me and AJ here on this channel. And that's about it for me. I'll see you next week.